look at the understanding of China. So how did China develop as a concept? Right? Starting from the clans which use stone tools and fighting each other. You know, as a political concept, if you look at the character over here, this is the Chinese character for country or nation. And in fact, it looks like this square box representing the city walls. So in the old cities, you would have like this square shape, and you know the important buildings are inside. There was, of course, some kind of ambiguity in the old times because you have this city, and this is a political unit. And later on, it's, of course, generalized to the broader sense of a country or nation. And Chinese people in the ancient time considered themselves to be central, and therefore 中国, the name of China, is like the central or the middle kingdom. So this is in the spring-autumn period. Suppress the rebellions of you southern barbarians, have no trespassing into the middle kingdom, right? So this is someone in the central government talking to the southern people, saying, you know, no offense shall be made to the middle kingdom. Guanzhong, we will talk about this person later on, and he compliments his king. The Qi Lord defends middle kingdom and resists the barbarians. Yeah. And we can look at how the southern people see themselves. This is one, Chu Zhuangwang, he is a king in a southern kingdom, which is considered to be barbarian by the northern people. It's like people more in the north say, you know, those uncivilized people. But he said, hey, I'm a savage. But today, all the lords all betray, invade, and kill each other. I have arms, and I would like to observe the politics of the Middle Kingdom. Observe here, you know, 日观中国之政. It means to interfere. Basically, I want to have a say in the Chinese politics in the Middle Kingdom. I asked the royal court to acknowledge my title. So he would like to be part of the big Chinese family. Say, I claim this title, and I asked the central government to acknowledge this. Let's go to the next one.
Sorry, does the name China mean something?
I mean, there are different sayings about how this English word or European word came about. But usually when we say China, for a Chinese person, when you say China, 中国, it means in the center. 中 is like in the middle, right? The center nation or kingdom. And I have already used this term in the quotes, right? So people already started to use this concept, although it didn't refer to China as we know now. It was more referring to the central area of the continent. Yeah? And China, of course, more importantly, it's actually a cultural identity. So in Yuan Dao, this is written by a scholar in the Tang Dynasty. 诸侯用以礼则夷之，夷狄近于中国则中国之. So I have to explain this a little bit. 诸侯 is like the lords, right? So the kings in the feudal system, basically, these are the noble people. If the lords would use the barbarian ways, we will consider them to be uncivilized barbarians. And if the barbarians were our neighbors, they would come into the Middle Kingdom, come into China. We would regard them and treat them as of the Middle Kingdom. And this is a kind of writing structure in Chinese that the first sentence and the second sentence use different verbs, but you should actually cross-reference and say that means the later sentence also implies the verb in the first sentence. So it means not only the neighbors enter into China, but that they conform into Chinese conventions. They use the courtesy, and the culture in the Middle Kingdom. Then they are of the Middle Kingdom. They are Chinese. So it is really an identity based on values. If you would behave in certain ways, you're considered to be of the Middle Kingdom, to be Chinese or barbarians, because you identify yourselves with this culture, then you're Chinese. Okay, and later one, this is taken from an article. If we speak of land or position, then yes, there is the distinction between Hua and Yi. Hua refers to China, Yi refers to barbarians. But in terms of education or civilization, is there also this idea? Hua, Yi, the distinction is at the heart. And so basically, there are people who are born in the Central Kingdom, but they act as barbarians. They have no morals, they have no courtesy. Then they're only Chinese outside, but their hearts are barbarians, right? There are people born outside, and they act according to moral standards. They're good people. They're Chinese people. So it's a name that implies this pride, that if you have the moral standards, if you act as a polite person, a considerate person, you're civilized, you're Chinese. This is the old view of how people identify China. Okay. Now, of course, we know China is also considered an idea of ethnicity, right? Chinese people, we say all the time. But we also know that China is not actually simply one race. There's so many different sources. So the evolution of China as a national state, I put in a actually quite simplified schematic. So if you examine this in detail, you find many mistakes. But we only look at the qualitative idea. Basically, from the old times, the Middle Kingdom to Han Dynasty, they formed this idea that these people are called the Han people, the Han Chinese. And later on, there was the rebellion of the 5 barbarians, which we will talk about in the next class. They basically later on mixed and intermarried and blended into China. Now they're one. In the Tang Dynasty, you see a huge variety of those things. Like there are different people in that area, and they have different culture, and it's a very complicated time, but also it has a lot of culture. Yeah? Later on into Song Dynasty, this is the time when Chinese people, or the Chinese people, so to say, that you will remember in the line of names when you memorize the Chinese timeline. Song Dynasty is considered to be China, and the northern people are the nomads. They are enemies. So it is a period when people started to again really emphasize the distinction. I'm Chinese, you're from outside. So this strengthened their idea of identity. And of course, later on came the Mongols, and they conquered basically the northern part, including the people considered as nomads as well, and the southern Chinese people. The Mongols didn't stay very long, and they didn't really come into China and combine with China at that time. They were kicked out by the Ming Dynasty, and later on, the Manchus were actually the Jing people. They conquered China. This is the last dynasty of China with emperors. And this is the period with a lot of expansion. So they took what's known as Xinjiang, the new territory. The name suggests itself to be a newly taken place. This is where now you see a lot of Muslims, and they are not actually the same as the Eastern Chinese people. And also the Qing dynasty took control over Tibet, and they also gradually brought in the Mongols. And so there are a lot of Mongols in China still today, although northern Mongolia is already a separate country. But southern Mongolia is still in China, and there are a lot of Mongolian people. So up to this point, it is a time when China was under invasion from Western imperialism at that time. And of course, that stimulates the sense of danger and say, our nation is, going to fall anytime. And again, this sort of stimulates people to think about, their position or their identity as Chinese people. And at about the end of the Qing dynasty and, around the time of the revolution, this scholar 𝐤𝐤𝐞𝐤, he was the one who basically proposed and then advocated the name of 中华民族. This is the term used today as the Chinese nation or the Chinese race. And when he did that, around that period, what they wanted to promote and emphasize is the idea of 五族共和. So they want to include the Han Chinese people, the Manchus, the Mongolians, and Tibetan and Hui in Xinjiang. Like all these people, that's have a big family of the Chinese nation. So this is actually a constructed idea instead of the status quo. Because obviously, those regions, the additional regions were taken by the Qing dynasty in the early years of Qing dynasty, which is like more than 300 years now, from now. But, of course, they are not the same as the Eastern Chinese people. This is the wish, they want to have the big family. And of course, you can see the term used, 中华民族, today by Chinese people a lot, but primarily still referring to the culture of the Han Chinese. These are the people who had been the most dominant throughout Chinese history because, in the early days, they developed writing first, and then they were always taking this position as, they were associated or they represent China. So this is actually a very dominant idea. So even now, when you hear people use the term 中华民族, it can mean all the people in China now, politically, but culturally it still is a very biased term, referring to the Han Chinese. Oh, wait. So and later on, let's look at the next content. So this is quote taken from 𝐒𝐷𝐻𝐻, and again, this is from Tang Taizong, the second emperor of the Tang Dynasty. He says, and I didn't put down the full translation. It says, from ancient times, everyone had favored Zhonghua, the central people, over the barbarians. Zhen, that means king, the king calling himself. I care for them all the same. That's why they trust me like a parent. And he used the term 中华. This is the central Chinese people, all right? And you can see it's the same word here. Okay? And later he said, 中国百姓, okay, the people of the citizens of the central kingdom is the root of the world, blah, blah, and the barbarians, they're like the leaves. He again used a very common term, 中国. So you can see that on the one hand, there is, of course, a continuation from ancient times. There is this China, and culturally, it's always growing. And from really early on, people already had the idea of Zhonghua, the Chinese culture, as an entity, or Zhongguo, the China or the Central Kingdom, as a political idea. They were never, until modern time, they were never formally used as the name of the government or the nation, but the concept was really early, right? So on the one hand, it is so. And on the other hand, of course, China now includes a lot more people of different backgrounds. And of course, they agree or disagree with this to different degrees.